When I first moved into Oak Ridge Estates, I was looking forward to a peaceful suburban life. Little did I know I'd stepped into the domain of the most tyrannical homeowners association in the county. My name is James Cooper, and I'm not just any resident. I'm the town marshal. This is the story of how one power-hungry HOA president named Karen Thompson tried to arrest me in my own backyard, and the chaotic war that followed. It was a quiet Sunday morning when everything exploded. I was enjoying my coffee, gazing out the window when I noticed 4 figures standing on my sidewalk. They were dressed in matching polo shirts with sunglasses, looking like they'd purchased their sense of authority from a discount store. One clutched a notebook, another had a toy radio strapped to her waist, but the ringleader was unmistakable. Karen Thompson with her short dyed hair, arms crossed, and an expression like she'd just sniffed vinegar. I took a deep breath, finished my coffee, and opened the door. Before I could speak, Karen launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "You are in serious violation of HOA rules, and we are here to take action," she announced, as if addressing a press conference. I stared at her, wondering if this was some elaborate prank. Before I could respond, she thrust a piece of plastic in my face that vaguely resembled a badge. "You are under investigation for numerous infractions," she continued, "including unauthorized painting of your garage, the presence of an unregistered vehicle on your property." She paused dramatically, "and inappropriate behavior towards members of the community." I nearly laughed. My garage had been the same color since I moved in. The unregistered vehicle was my perfectly legal truck parked in my own driveway. And inappropriate behavior, that was code for refusing to attend their pointless HOA meetings. Then came the bombshell. "Because you refused to heed previous warnings, the HOA is exercising its right to civil custody, and we're here to take you into custody until the matter is resolved." I blinked, processing what she'd just said. "You want to arrest me?" Karen puffed out her chest. "The HOA has full authority over this neighborhood." Her 3 minions nodded in perfect synchronization, like well-trained parrots. That's when I realized just how delusional these people were. They genuinely believed they had the power to arrest someone. They had no idea they were trying to detain an actual law enforcement officer, not a mall cop or neighborhood watch volunteer, but the town marshal with a real badge, gun, and a rapidly dwindling supply of patience. I decided to play along. "Interesting," I said, feigning consideration. "And how exactly do you intend to arrest me?" Karen pointed to one of her goons, a man with a beer belly straining against a too small t-shirt. He pulled out a pair of plastic handcuffs from his pocket. "We have our methods," he said, trying to sound tough. It was official. The circus had come to my doorstep. I stepped back and pulled my wallet from my pocket, flipping it open to reveal my shiny badge. Karen's smile vanished instantly. "Good to know you think you can make arrests," I said in my most serious tone. "Because at the moment, you're committing a series of crimes, including impersonation of a law enforcement officer and attempted kidnapping." The silence was deafening. Karen's eyes widened, her henchmen exchanged nervous glances, and they finally realized they'd messed with the wrong person. What are you implying?" Karen stammered, her confidence crumbling. "I'm implying that unless you disappear from my property in the next 5 seconds, I'm going to arrest you for real." Sweat beaded on one guy's forehead. Karen's hand trembled as she clutched her laminated paper. Then, like rats fleeing a sinking ship, they began backpedaling, mumbling excuses. "This isn't over yet," Karen shouted before spinning on her heels and marching off with her pathetic entourage. I watched them retreat, feeling both amused and bewildered. What had just happened? But deep down, I knew this was just the opening act. If I thought that ridiculous arrest scene was the end, I was sorely mistaken. The next morning, I discovered my trash cans had mysteriously disappeared. Across the street stood Karen, arms crossed, wearing a satisfied smirk before disappearing into her house. When I checked my mail, I found an envelope with the HOA stamp containing a list of penalties for non-compliance with community standards. According to them, I was now forbidden from using waste disposal services. couldn't park in my own garage, and had to attend a mandatory meeting to discuss my inappropriate behavior. I tore the paper in half right there, letting the pieces fall to the ground. If Karen wanted to annoy me, she'd need to try harder. That afternoon, I returned home to find an orange cone blocking my driveway with a plastic notice declaring my garage closed by order of the HOA. I promptly removed the cone and tossed it onto the sidewalk, noticing two of Karen's cronies watching from across the street, one scribbling in a notebook as if documenting a crime scene. Within minutes, Karen appeared, her face already flushing with anger. "You can't remove that," she shouted. "Oh, can I? In my own house?" She jabbed a finger at her laminated paper. "This is an HOA sanction. You can't just ignore community rules." I took a deep breath to avoid laughing in her face. "Karen, you don't have the authority to ban my garage. In fact, you have no authority to do anything but annoy me." Her eyes widened in indignation, but I went inside and slammed the door before she could respond. The next day, while at the police station, I received a call from one of the few neighbors who wasn't part of Karen's cult. "Dude, the police are at your house," he said nervously. "2 cars. They said they received a tip about a man with a gun on your property." I immediately understood. Karen had escalated. She'd called the police with a fabricated story to get me in trouble. I drove straight home to find 2 officers talking to Karen, who was playing the concerned citizen role to perfection. I got out of my car, and the officers recognized me immediately. "Oh, boss," one of them said awkwardly. "We received a report about suspicious activity involving a man with a gun at this residence." I looked directly at Karen. "I bet the report came from this lady here, huh?" She feigned innocence, placing a hand on her chest. "I only reported what I heard. Some people saw suspicious movement and got worried." The officers exchanged knowing glances. One sighed and turned to me. "Well, since there's no real threat, we'll register this as a prank. But Miss Karen, just for the record, making false reports can get you into serious trouble." Karen's face turned red. For the first time, she looked genuinely nervous. She opened her mouth to protest but thought better of it, crossing her arms in silent fury instead. After the officers left, Karen and I stood there in a silent standoff. I could see in her eyes that she understood she was playing with fire, but I also knew she wasn't about to surrender. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of a heavy truck pulling up in front of my house. Still groggy, I went to the window and saw a team of uniformed workers unloading excavation equipment and orange cones. They looked ready to tear up my entire yard. Across the street stood Karen, arms crossed with that same smug smile, watching like a general overseeing a battlefield. I went outside in my pajamas and approached the crew. Their leader turned to me, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, sir. We're starting repairs on the underground pipes." "What repairs?" "We received a request from the Residents Association about a water leak on this property." I glanced at Karen, who was pretending to admire a tree. "Let me guess, the work order was signed by Karen Thompson." The man checked his paperwork and nodded. "Yes, the order came from Karen Thompson, president of the HOA. This woman had arranged to have my entire yard excavated for a non-existent leak." I took a deep breath to maintain my composure. "Look, buddy, there's no leak here. Neither you nor the HOA are authorized to touch anything on my property, so pack up your tools and leave." The man hesitated, looking at his colleagues for guidance. "Well, sir, we're already here and—" I showed him my badge. The effect was immediate. His eyes widened, he swallowed hard and turned to his crew. "Right, guys, let's call it a day." As the workers began collecting their tools, Karen marched toward me like a runaway train. "You can't do this," she shouted. "Do what? Stop you from destroying my yard for no reason." "The HOA has authority over the neighborhood's infrastructure. And I have the authority to arrest you for trespassing and fraud." Her mouth opened and closed several times like a fish out of water. For once, she was speechless, but not for long. "You're disrespecting the community. That's not how a good neighbor behaves." I stepped closer, lowering my voice just to watch the color drain from her face. And you're meddling where you shouldn't be. Karen threw her hands up, huffed dramatically, and stomped back to her house like a child throwing a tantrum. Just when I thought things couldn't get more ridiculous, a new player entered the game. Daniel Morrison, Karen's second-in-command and the HOA treasurer, showed up at my door the following day. Unlike Karen's aggressive approach, Daniel was all smooth talk and fake smiles. "James," he said, using my first name as if we were old friends, "I think we got off on the wrong foot here. The HOA isn't trying to make enemies, we're just ensuring everyone follows the same standards." I leaned against my doorframe. "By trying to arrest me and digging up my yard." Daniel laughed nervously. "Karen can be enthusiastic, but I'm here to offer a compromise." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a proposal. If I agreed to pay $2,500 in retroactive compliance fees and signed a document acknowledging the HOA's authority, they would drop all complaints against me. "This is extortion," I said flatly. Daniel's smile didn't waver. "It's a settlement offer. Think about it. You pay a small fee and all this unpleasantness goes away." I handed the envelope back to him. "Here's my counteroffer. You and Karen stop harassing me, or I'll have both of you charged with multiple offenses." His smile finally faltered. "You're making a mistake, Cooper. Karen might be the face of the HOA, but I'm the one who knows how to apply pressure where it hurts." As he walked away, I realized that Karen might be the loudmouth, but Daniel was potentially more dangerous, the calculating mind behind her brute force tactics. The next week, I received an official letter stating my house was under disciplinary review and that my behavior was harming community well-being. They were actually trying to evict me from my own home. According to their letter, I had accumulated several serious infractions and was openly defying HOA authority. Therefore, my presence was no longer desired, and they were taking steps to revoke my residency. I laughed out loud at the absurdity. The HOA had absolutely no power to evict anyone. They didn't own my house, had no control over my mortgage, and couldn't simply decide I couldn't live there anymore. But Karen and Daniel had managed to turn many neighbors against me. I'd become public enemy number one, the rebel defying the sacred HOA order. At the supermarket, a neighbor I barely knew approached me and whispered, "You know, some people think you really don't fit in here. Maybe you should consider moving." I gave her a fake smile. Some people should worry more about their own lives. She blushed and hurried away. The HOA scheduled a disciplinary meeting for Friday evening. I attended purely for the pleasure of watching Karen fail publicly. The community room was packed with neighbors seated in rows like a courtroom. Karen stood at the front with a stack of papers, clearly ready for my public execution. She cleared her throat and began speaking in the condescending tone of a kindergarten teacher. "We're here to discuss the highly problematic behavior of the gentleman who refuses to cooperate with the community." I rolled my eyes. "Cut the bullshit, Karen. You want to kick me out of the neighborhood." She tried to maintain her composure. "Well, considering the number of offenses accumulated." "What offenses exactly? Forged kidnapping, trolling the police, illegal construction in my yard." She turned red but pressed on. "The point is—" "The point," I interrupted, "is that the HOA has no power to remove anyone from here. This isn't a gated community, Karen. You're not the sheriff, and this meeting means absolutely nothing." The room fell silent. Some neighbors exchanged glances, as if realizing this truth for the first time. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then attempted to laugh it off. "This is absurd. You simply don't fit into our community." "Yeah, I think I'm going to continue not fitting in, because I'm not going anywhere." She glared at me, her face burning with anger, but she knew she'd lost this round. Then Daniel stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "Perhaps I can clarify the legal situation," he said smoothly. "While the HOA cannot directly evict Mr. Cooper, our bylaws do allow us to place liens on properties for unpaid fines and fees." He produced a folder and placed it on the table. Mr. Cooper currently owes $12,450 in accumulated fines, late fees, and special assessments. If these remain unpaid, we can legally file a lien that would make it virtually impossible for him to refinance or sell his property without settling these debts. The room buzzed with whispers. Daniel had just changed the game. He wasn't trying to kick me out directly. He was trying to financially trap me. "Those are fabricated charges," I said firmly. Daniel smiled. "Every fine is documented and in accordance with our bylaws, which you agreed to when purchasing your property." An older woman in the back stood up. "I've lived here for 20 years, and I've never seen the HOA act this way before Karen and Daniel took over. This is bullying, plain and simple." To my surprise, several other neighbors nodded in agreement. The tide was beginning to turn. Daniel quickly tried to regain control. "We're simply enforcing the rules everyone agreed to follow." "By making them up as you go along," I challenged. "Let's see those bylaws and when they were last amended." Daniel's confident expression wavered slightly. "The current bylaws are under revision." "In other words," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "you've been enforcing rules that don't exist." The meeting dissolved into chaos after that, with neighbors arguing amongst themselves. Some defended the HOA leadership, while others began questioning everything they'd been told. Karen eventually adjourned the meeting, but the damage was done. Cracks were forming in her kingdom. The week after the meeting, I woke to sirens outside my house. Looking out the window, I saw 2 county enforcement vehicles parked in front of my home. Karen was across the street, pretending to casually observe while sporting that satisfied look I'd come to despise. I went downstairs and opened the door before the inspectors could knock. A middle-aged man with a notebook approached me with forced professionalism. "Sir, we've received complaints about multiple structural irregularities in this property. We need to conduct a full inspection." Irregularities? According to the report, this residence has unauthorized construction, irregular plumbing, and a possible pest infestation. Karen was no longer playing games. She was trying to get my house condemned. "And who filed this complaint?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The HOA officially filed it," he replied after a brief hesitation. "Of course," I said, opening the door wider. "Come in and inspect everything." The inspectors spent nearly 2 hours examining every inch of my house, measuring walls, checking pipes, looking in cabinets, and taking photos. All while Karen and her supporters waited outside, anticipating my downfall. When they finished, the younger inspector approached me. "Sir, we've completed our inspection and found none of the irregularities mentioned in the complaint. Your property complies with all county regulations." I couldn't hold back my laughter. So the complaint was completely false. The inspector shifted uncomfortably. "Well, technically, yes." "Good, because I'm filing a formal complaint against the HOA for harassment and misuse of public resources." Karen rushed over before the inspectors had even left. "You're overreacting. It was just safety protocol." "A safety protocol? Strange, since the inspectors say my house is perfect. Either you lied or you're terrible at inspections." She gritted her teeth and looked to the inspectors for support, but they simply shrugged, clearly tired of the drama. As I began calling the inspection department to formalize my complaint, Karen finally backed down. "This isn't over yet," she hissed before stomping away. But for once, she was wrong. It was nearly over. The next morning, I received an unexpected visitor, Sarah Chen, a local investigative journalist who'd been following HOA abuses across the county. "Marshal Cooper, I'm Sarah Chen from the County Chronicle," she said, showing her press credentials. "I've been hearing some interesting stories about your HOA. Would you be willing to talk about your experiences?" I invited her in, and for the next 2 hours, I detailed everything that had happened. Sarah took copious notes, occasionally asking for clarification. "You're not the first person to contact me about this HOA," she revealed. "I've received complaints from 3 other neighborhoods where Karen Thompson previously lived. She has a history of taking over HOAs and using them as personal fiefdoms. What about Daniel Morrison? I asked. Sarah's expression darkened. He's the financial wizard. In 2 previous HOAs, he served as treasurer before significant funds mysteriously disappeared. Nothing was ever proven, but both associations ended up bankrupt. This was bigger than I thought. So they're serial HOA tyrants. Exactly. They move from neighborhood to neighborhood, take control of the HOA, squeeze residents for money through arbitrary fines, then move on when people start asking questions about the finances. Sarah's exposé in the County Chronicle hit like a bombshell the following week. The front page headline read, HOA corruption, the neighborhood tyrants of OAKRIDGESDATES. The article detailed Karen and Daniel's history of HOA takeovers, financial mismanagement, and harassment of residents who questioned their authority. The story sparked immediate action. The county prosecutor's office opened an investigation into the HOA's finances. Other residents came forward with their own stories of harassment and extortion. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, which quickly turned into a shouting match. Karen and Daniel tried to maintain control, but the momentum had shifted dramatically. When a county auditor revealed that over $30,000 was missing from the HOA accounts, the room erupted. Daniel tried to explain it away as administrative costs, but no one was buying it anymore. The board voted unanimously to remove both Karen and Daniel from office immediately. Karen screamed threats about lawsuits while Daniel quietly tried to slip out the back door, only to find 2 police officers waiting. As the real handcuffs were placed on their wrists, someone in the crowd shouted, "Now that's what I call community service." The investigation revealed that Karen and Daniel had been running this scheme for years across multiple neighborhoods. They would move in, take over the HOA through intimidation and procedural manipulation, institute harsh fines, and siphon money from the association funds. When residents started asking questions, they would sell their homes and move to a new neighborhood to start fresh. In the aftermath, our HOA underwent a complete transformation. Rules were relaxed, unfair fines were canceled, and a new board ensured that no single person could ever again wield such power over residents. Monthly financial reports became mandatory and publicly available. Karen and Daniel both faced multiple charges of fraud, embezzlement, and harassment. Karen eventually took a plea deal and served 6 months in county jail, while Daniel, who had previous financial crimes on his record, received a 3-year sentence. As for me, I was unanimously elected to the new HOA advisory board, a position I accepted on the condition that meetings would be limited to quarterly and would always include refreshments. My first official act was to propose a neighborhood barbecue in my backyard, the same yard Karen had tried to excavate. The for sale signs that went up at both Karen's and Daniel's houses were the sweetest sight in the neighborhood. Rumor has it that Karen moved to a rural area where there are no HOAs, while Daniel's new address is a federal correctional facility where, ironically, the rules are strictly enforced. Sometimes, when I'm enjoying my morning coffee on my porch, I think about those plastic handcuffs and can't help but smile. In the end, justice has a way of coming full circle, especially when you mess with the real sheriff in town.